Hello, Shemai. I'm Andy Hale from Ensono Digital, and in this short video we're going to take a look at the Web API with CQRS template, which is one of the templates included in the Stacks package. This template has all the features that are included in the Web API template, but in addition to those features, it implements the CQRS pattern. So if you're looking to start a project that uses CQRS, this template will give you a good starting point. Likewise, if you're new to CQRS and you would like to see an example of how it all works, this template will serve as a good guide. To create our project, we'll start at the Stacks website, which is stacks.ensono.com. We're going to choose C# and .NET as our language and framework. And for our solution architecture, we'll choose the REST Web API with CQRS. For a cloud provider, we'll choose Microsoft Azure. And click Let's Go. Now we're taken to the relevant documentation, how to create our project. For the purpose of this video, we're going to assume that we've already installed the Stacks package. So we scroll down to the Stacks Web API with CQRS template. Here we find the command to create our project from the template. We can see the command has a few options. So let's copy the command, and we're going to move to the command line to look at each of these options. At the command line, we'll paste the command that we just copied with Ctrl and V. On a Mac, this will be Command and V. As with all templates, we start with .NET New, and then we provide the name of our template, which in our case is stacks-CQRS. Then we'll give our solution a name. In this example, we're going to use company.project, but you can use any name that you wish. This name will be used for namespaces in your solution, so be mindful of any reserved words or legal characters for project names. Next, we're going to choose the name of a domain object. This will be the name of a sample aggregate that's created in the domain model, and it will inform the name of the sample commands and queries that are created for us. Next, we'll choose a storage service for our solution. Currently, Stacks provides three options: an in-memory option, which whilst is good for demonstrations, is not suitable for production workloads, Azure Cosmos DB or AWS DynamoDB. We're going to host this example in Azure, so we're going to choose Cosmos DB. Next, we'll choose an event publisher. This is so each time a command is handled by a command handler and it changes the state of our model, an event can be raised, so any parties that are interested in these changes can react. Currently, Stacks supports Azure Service Bus, Azure Event Hubs, and AWS SNS. Again, we're hosting in Azure, so we're going to choose Azure Service Bus. Finally, we choose our cloud provider, which is Azure. Now the solution has been created, let's see what we have. Moving to File Explorer, we see we have a directory that was created for us with the same name that we gave the template. Inside here, we see we have build assets, deployment assets, and source code. Inside the source code folder, we have a folder for CQRS, and inside here, we'll find a folder for contracts. These are open API definitions for the API that was just generated, and we have source code. Inside the source code folder, we see we have our API, and we have functional tests. Inside the API folder, we have our solution file. I'm going to open this in Visual Studio, but you can use an editor of your choice, such as Visual Studio Code or Writer. Our solution has several projects. Some key projects are the API project. This is our entry point. This is what we'll run to start the solution. The domain model project, if we look inside here, we see we have an aggregate root called menu. This is because we gave menu as the name of the domain object when we ran the template. Our CQRS project contains all of the commands and queries that we wish to use. And inside the application folder, we have our command handlers and our query handlers, which will handle our commands and queries. Now, to start the project up, we'll need to configure it. If we look inside the API project and the app settings file, when we created our solution, we chose Cosmos DB and Azure Service Bus. So these are the two areas of our configuration file that we'll need to configure. For Cosmos DB, we'll need to provide the Cosmos DB key. Let's look at how we find that. I'm going to use the option to run Cosmos DB locally in the emulator. So let's browse there. When we open the Azure Cosmos DB emulator, we see we have the URI and the primary key. These are the two pieces of information that we'll need to configure our Stacks project to connect to Azure Cosmos DB. So make a note of these. Now we'll create our container. We do this in the Explorer tab. Choose New Container and pick a name for the database that will host the container. We'll choose Stacks. Then we give our container a name. We'll use menu as this matches the name of the aggregate root. Then for a partition key, we'll use /ID and click OK. Now we have everything we need to configure Stacks to use Cosmos DB. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Here we see to configure Cosmos DB, the first piece of information we need to provide is the database account URI. In the template that was generated, we're already using the emulator, so we don't need to change this. Next, we set the database name, which is Stacks, and that matches the database that we just created. Finally, we need to provide the primary key, and from the configuration file, we can see that this is a secret. It's provided through the environment, and it has the name cosmosdb_key. So we need to create an environment variable called cosmosdb_key. To do that, we'll go up to the menu, we'll choose Debug Properties, and in the screen that appears, we can create environment variables. We'll create an environment variable for cosmosdb_key, and for the value, we use the primary key that we made a note of earlier. We can close this window, and that's CosmosDB configured. Now let's move on to Azure Service Bus. To configure Azure Service Bus, we'll start at the Azure portal. We're looking for the Service Bus option. If you don't see that, in the search bar, if you type Service Bus, you can choose it as an option here. This screen shows you all the service buses that you have created, or you can create a new one. We're going to use an existing service bus, so we'll choose it, and we're going to use a topic. So we choose Topics, and choose an existing topic. Make a note of your topic name, we're going to need it in our configuration. Then for our last piece of information, we're going to look at shared access policies. In our list of shared access policies, we're looking for a policy that has the send claim. This is because we're going to send messages to the service bus. Choose a shared access policy and make a note of the connection string. Now back to Visual Studio. Back in Visual Studio, to configure Service Bus, we see we need two pieces of information. We need the name of the topic, and we need a connection string. The connection string is a secret that's stored in the environment with the key servicebus_connection string. To add that environment variable, again we'll go back up to our menu, choose the debug properties, and create an environment variable called servicebus_connection string. For the value, we'll use the connection string that we just made a note of. Something to check when entering your connection string is to be aware that we don't need this entity path because we've already given the topic name. So if your connection string includes that, you can remove it. And that's Service Bus configured. Now we can start our solution. When we run our solution, we're presented with the Open API screen, and we can see all of the different endpoints that we can call from our CQRS REST API. Let's try a command. The post command will create a new menu in our database, and it'll raise an event to say that a menu has been created. So let's try it out. This is the information that we're going to post to our API, and we'll execute. Once completed, we'll head back to our Cosmos DB emulator, take a look inside the Stacks database, the menu container, and our list of items. And here we see we have a new item with the details that match what we posted. Then if we look at our service bus and check for a list of messages, we see we have a message with all the information from the event that we just created. Now let's try a query. The get menu endpoint will retrieve all of the menus that we have. So let's try it out. And here we see in our results, we have the menu that we created with the previous commands. So that's how we configured the Stacks CQRS REST API package. Before we finish this video, one final area to explore is the automated testing. In the current solution, you can see that we have unit tests, component tests, and integration tests, but we also have another solution for functional testing. Back in File Explorer, alongside our API directory, you see we have a test directory, and this contains our functional testing solution. Let's open it up. Inside this solution, you can see we have a few sample tests, all within this stories folder because they are written in the behavioral-driven development style. To run these tests, in the app settings file, we just need to provide the URL of our running CQRS project. So start up the CQRS project, find the URL that it's running on, enter it here, and then we can run our tests, like so. And there we have it, all tests pass. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching and happy coding.